They say our world is three dimensions, four if you count time. But every so often something slips. A building that rearranges itself overnight. A forest that vanishes. Not cut, not burned, just gone. An elevator that opens to a hallway no architect ever designed. A highway exit used for decades. That suddenly isn't there anymore. Scientists call them localized anomalies. Witnesses call them impossible. But inside a handful of leaked documents, maps with missing streets, photos with geometry that shouldn't exist, coordinates the government refuses to acknowledge, one word appears again and again: dimensional breach. Tonight we're opening 10 files that suggest our world isn't sealed shut. These are the places where another reality leaked into ours. Welcome to Archive 9. You don't expect a building to breathe. You don't expect it to change shape or shift its hallways or erase a room that existed the day before. But in Omsk, Russia, deep inside a district built during the late Soviet era, there is a structure locals quietly call the living building. The nickname wasn't meant as a joke. The first documented incident dates back to 1987, written inside a faded security log recovered from a maintenance office. The guard on duty reported that a stairwell on the east side no longer reached the third floor and instead looped back into the second. He assumed the architects had made a mistake until he noticed something even stranger. The exit sign above the door had changed color overnight, from green to red, despite regulations requiring uniformity. He filed a note. The note was ignored. 2 nights later, the stairwell reached the fourth floor. The third had returned, but the door handle had moved. When the Soviet Union dissolved, the building was abandoned. Or at least, that's what the official records say. But satellite photos from 1993 show lights still turning on in patterns that don't align with human activity. Not rows of windows lighting up at once, but diagonal streaks, zigzags, flickers that travel like pulses through the structure, as if something inside was testing its pathways. Residents in nearby blocks began reporting that the building looked different each season, not renovated, not damaged, just rearranged. Windows appearing where there were none, balconies shifting position, a ground-level entrance stretching wider by several inches every winter. One man swore the building had rotated a few degrees counterclockwise between 2001 and 2002. His neighbors laughed. But when surveyors later checked old property lines, they found he was right. The building had moved. In 2006, a group of university students broke in with handheld cameras. Their footage was never officially released, but a leaked still frame shows a hallway with no vanishing point, a corridor whose geometry bends subtly outward instead of inward, violating the laws of perspective. Walls that seem to push forward, like lungs expanding, a ceiling that rises as you walk toward it. They reported hearing faint tapping from inside the walls. Not mechanical clicking, more like communication, patterns, responses. One student described a moment where a door frame narrowed behind them, like the building was trying to separate the group. They left immediately. The next night, the same doorway was sealed shut by a smooth wall. No seams, no plaster marks, no sign of construction, just gone. The most chilling account came from a municipal mapper assigned to update Omsk's district blueprints in 2014. He noted that every time he measured the building from the outside, it was consistent, stable, but the interior? He could never align the measurements. Rooms expanded by inches between visits. Staircases shortened or lengthened. Corridors split or merged. His report included a line that was later redacted in official documents. The interior dimensions do not belong to the exterior shell. Architects have a word for this: impossible. Physicists have another: non-Euclidean. But one section of the leaked file, stamped with a Soviet-era security seal, suggests a darker theory. It claims the building was constructed on an unstable spatial coordinate, a phrase used only in research involving dimensional physics. The document implies the structure wasn't changing on its own. It was adapting, responding to something it touched. Some believe Omsk's living building is not alive in the biological sense, but alive in the dimensional sense. A structure caught between two spaces, shifting to accommodate whichever reality it partially occupies at any given moment. The government sealed the site in 2019 after a maintenance worker disappeared inside during routine inspection. His body was never found. The room he entered reportedly no longer exists on any map. Today, the building stands silent, still, harmless, at least from the outside. But locals say if you press your ear against the wall at night, it presses back. This is the first file, and it suggests that some structures in our world aren't built on land. They're built on the edge of another dimension. There's a stretch of desert in Nevada that doesn't appear on any tourist map. It's not inside Area 51. It's not near nuclear test sites. It's just a strip of sunburnt land, sandwiched between two forgotten highways. A place so ordinary you'd never look at it twice, until you step into it and realize the world stops behaving the way it should. Truckers call it the backwards area, a name whispered in late-night CB radio channels, passed around like a warning wrapped in humor. But the laughter always sounds forced, because everyone who's been there agrees on one thing. For a few hundred yards, reality runs in reverse. The earliest documented incident came from a surveyor named Don Keller in 1991. He was mapping old service roads when his compass needle spun 180 degrees, but instead of pointing south, it aimed directly behind him, toward a place he'd already walked through. Assuming his equipment was malfunctioning, Keller pulled out a backup analog compass. It did the same thing. When he checked his wristwatch, the second hand wasn't ticking forward. It wasn't ticking backward either. It was stuck. But every time he blinked, it had moved in reverse. Keller reported a localized temporal reversal, a phrase no one in his department took seriously. His supervisors blamed heat stroke, but one detail in his report was too specific to ignore. He claimed that his footprints behind him were fresher than the ones he was currently making, as if he had walked there after he arrived. Fast forward to 2004, when a pair of amateur storm chasers drove through the same region. Their dash cam captured something bizarre: dust clouds drifting backward, pulling themselves into tight spirals before dropping to the ground. The wind wasn't blowing in reverse. The dust was moving in reverse. When the footage reached online forums, skeptics accused them of editing it. But meteorologists confirmed the dust pattern was not possible under any known atmospheric conditions. In 2013, a hiker named Maria Alonso went missing near the region. A search team located her 2 days later, disoriented but unharmed. Her account was dismissed as trauma-induced confusion until investigators listened more closely. Maria said she saw her own silhouette moving ahead of her, like a shadow walking backward through the air. When she reached the spot, Her shadow wasn't there, but a fresh set of footprints were. They led in the wrong direction, toward where she came from. Except she insisted she had never walked that path. There's more. A leaked Department of Energy memo from 2017 mentions the area under a coded term, Zone R12, Temporal Inversion Field. One line was left unredacted. All chronological measurement fails to stabilize within this sector. Recommend avoidance. Another report, stamped with a Homeland Security watermark, describes a drone test in the same region. When the drone crossed into the zone, its live feed began playing backward. Not scrambled, not frozen. Backward, as if time inside the feed were rewinding. When the drone exited, the feed snapped back to real time. But the stored footage for that 90-second period was corrupted beyond recovery, showing only static in a single haunting frame. The drone hovering above its own shadow, but the shadow was upside down. Some physicists believe these anomalies are caused by magnetic reversals, but the magnetic field in the area is normal. Others suspect geothermal disturbances, but the ground is stable. Theories don't explain why radios play fragments of conversations, not past ones, not present ones, but conversations that haven't happened yet. Truckers say they've heard their own voices answering questions they didn't ask. One retired sheriff admitted off-record that his patrol car rolled backward uphill for nearly 20 feet, engine dead, keys in his pocket. He never wrote the incident down. "Would you?" he asked. But his dash cam caught something incredible. The car's headlights illuminated dust trails that moved toward the sky instead of falling back to the ground. The strangest file comes from a physicist attached to a classified research team in 2020. After measuring chronon particles, microscopic indicators of temporal direction, he concluded the region wasn't reversing time. It was borrowing it, pulling time from another point in the timeline and funneling it backward through a tear in dimensional space. His final statement is the reason the site remains unmarked and unstudied. The reversal is localized, but the source is not. Something on the other side is pushing time toward us. The backwards area of Nevada isn't a glitch. It's a warning, a place where our dimension's arrow of time bends, because something else in another layer of reality is bending it. The desert in northern Mexico is never truly quiet. Even at night you hear insects, distant winds, the hum of life under the sand. But there is a patch of land, a perfect oval, roughly 50 kilometers wide, where sound doesn't just fade, it disappears, radios die, compasses drift, metal objects refuse to function. Locals call it La Zona del Silencio, the silent zone, and for decades the government has insisted it's nothing more than a natural phenomenon. But the files tell a different story. The first modern report came in 1970, when an American Athena test missile veered dramatically off course and slammed into the region. Engineers insisted the guidance system had flipped mid-flight, as if some invisible force hijacked its trajectory. When recovery teams arrived, every single piece of electronic equipment failed. Radios, navigation tools, even analog meters. Their helicopter's altimeter spun in circles like a compass lost in deep space. One pilot claimed the sky above the crash site looked thicker, as if the air itself were bending light. Stranger still, the vegetation around the impact zone wasn't damaged. It had grown taller, denser, as if accelerated. Yet no radiation was detected. By the late 1980s, hikers and researchers began reporting identical anomalies. watches slowing down by several minutes per hour, metal objects heating without exposure to sun, directional sound moving away from the source, voices muffled by invisible pressure pockets, GPS coordinates drifting as though the land itself were sliding sideways. A geologist famously lost an entire drone team to unexplained shutdowns. Footage recovered from the last drone showed something remarkable. The horizon line was subtly curved, inward, not outward, like the camera was inside a bowl, not on a flat desert. But the most compelling evidence comes from intercepted transmissions dated 1998, classified by the Mexican government and leaked by an anonymous engineer. The documents describe the silent zone as a disrupted dimensional pocket where electromagnetic behavior does not match the surrounding region. One line stands out: signals do not vanish. They are refracted, redirected to an unknown destination. If signals are being redirected, then the zone isn't absorbing them. It's sending them somewhere. In 2004, a group of biology students encountered something that still unsettles investigators: a patch of desert where their own voices echoed back to them several seconds late. But the pitch was wrong, deeper, slower, like a version of themselves speaking from a heavier, denser world. When they stepped out of the patch, the echo vanished instantly. The strangest case came from a metallurgist studying mineral deposits in 2012. He heard a faint rhythmic clicking, almost like Morse code, coming from beneath the ground. But when he placed a microphone on the soil, there was nothing. The sound existed only in the air, not in any physical medium. He described it as a signal trying to arrive, but not meant for our world. In recent years, new anomalies have emerged, stronger, sharper, harder to dismiss. Hikers claim to see floating orbs that reflect landscapes not found anywhere in the region: pine forests, distant mountains, swirling violet skies. One woman captured a photo of an orb that showed the reflection of a city skyline she didn't recognize: towering spires, dark glass, and an archway shaped like a perfect triangle. Experts labeled it lens flare, but the metadata confirmed there were no light sources behind her. Government researchers now avoid the area entirely, but local ranchers say they still see unmarked vehicles patrolling the perimeter at night. Windows tinted, never stopping, never entering. The final leaked file, dated 2021, offers the most terrifying explanation yet. It states that the silent zone is located at a site where Earth's geomagnetic field thins, allowing dimensional overlap. A place where waves, sound, radio, magnetic, even time, slip not into the ground, but sideways, into another layer of reality. A dimension where physics pulls differently, communication warps, and signals don't behave like ours. The desert isn't silent because something is missing. It's silent because something else is listening, just not from our side. And whatever is on the receiving end, it's starting to answer back. Forests don't simply vanish. They burn, they rot, they get cut down, but they don't blink out of existence like someone turned off a light switch. Except that's exactly what happened in a rural district of Belarus, where a 12-hectare pine woodland reportedly disappeared not once, but multiple times over the last 40 years. Locals call it the breathing forest, not because the trees move, but because the entire forest seems to exhale in and out of reality. The earliest known account dates back to 1982. A group of hunters described walking toward the tree line at dawn when a sudden fog rolled in, thin, low, and unnaturally cold. When it cleared minutes later, the tree line was gone. Not damaged, not obscured, gone. Flat, empty land stretching out where hundreds of trees had been the day before. They fled. By the time authorities arrived 48 hours later, the forest had returned exactly as before. Same age, same height, same density, as if it had never left. Their story was dismissed as a fabrication until 1996, when a state cartography team documented a nearly identical event. 3 surveyors reported that their GPS units malfunctioned as they crossed a boundary near the site. All satellite readings dropped to zero. Then the trees in front of them flickered, not like shadows, like a bad rendering. The forest shimmered, distorted, then dissolved into an empty field, a perfect imprint of the forest floor without any vegetation. It reappeared 19 minutes later. This time there was proof. One of the surveyors had a camera running. The footage, buried in government archives, shows a cluster of trunks bending inward like soft clay before evaporating into a pale haze. Experts who reviewed the tape later claimed it looked closer to a dimensional shift than meteorological distortion. The Belarusian government restricted access shortly afterward, citing unexploded ordnance in the region, an excuse so thin that locals openly joke of it. But the anomalies didn't stop. In 2008, a botanist studying soil composition reported that the ground inside the forest had 2 distinct layers of growth rings, one older, one younger, as though the forest had aged in 2 separate timelines. When she returned a month later to collect more samples, her marked plot was gone, not destroyed, not relocated, missing. A 3-meter circle of soil was simply absent, replaced by dry, cracked ground that didn't match the region's natural composition. In 2014, a forestry patrol witnessed the forest vanish again, this time in broad daylight. The air reportedly became thin and metallic, like the atmosphere at high altitude. The birds went silent first, then the wind, then the forest. One officer claimed the trees folded inward, collapsing into a single point of space before winking out like a collapsing star. But his official statement was sanitized to remove every detail except severe fog interference. The most disturbing account comes from 2020 during a routine satellite scan. Analysts noticed that during a 43-second time frame, the forest registered as negative space, an absence, a void, not a blank image, a measurable void, as if the satellite were looking through a hole in the Earth's dimensional fabric. When the image stabilized, the forest was back, unchanged. A classified physics report leaked in 2021 proposed a chilling possibility. The forest wasn't disappearing. It was overlapping with another version of itself, one slightly out of phase with our reality. A dimensional slip, where 2 nearly identical forests existed at the same coordinates, but in different layers of space-time, occasionally swapping visibility depending on unknown triggers. The report theorized that the boundary, the breathing zone, fluctuates based on geomagnetic stress points. When these points spike, the forest shifts dimension like a curtain blowing between 2 open windows. Local villagers tell the story differently. They say that if you walk into the forest at the wrong time, you don't hear birds or wind, or even your own footsteps. You hear another forest, one deeper, darker, fuller than the one you can see. Rustlings from trees that aren't there. Footsteps that don't match your pace. Voices whispering from a forest that belongs to a world just one breath away. And sometimes they say, when the forest fades, it doesn't take only the trees with it. The files don't mention that part, but the missing person reports in that region tell their own story. Staircases aren't supposed to lead you somewhere new each time you climb them. They're the most predictable part of a building. Fixed angles, fixed landings, fixed geometry. But scattered across Europe, Asia, and the old Soviet bloc are reports of staircases that don't stay put. Not haunted, not cursed, just wrong. Like pieces of architecture that refuse to obey the dimension they were built in. Researchers call it the shifting staircase phenomenon. Locals call them something simpler, the stairs that move. The earliest verified case appeared in 1974 inside an administrative building in Prague. A night custodian named Ludwig filed a report claiming a staircase on the west wing suddenly stretched. His words weren't poetic. He meant it literally. A staircase with 10 steps became one with 13. When measured the next morning, it returned to 10. His logbook includes a strange detail. The railing felt warm, like it had been handled moments earlier. But he had been alone in the building. Throughout the 1980s, more accounts surfaced, mostly from maintenance staff, janitors, late shift workers, people who used staircases when buildings were empty. They described landings that shifted position, steps that realigned, staircases that curved ever so slightly in new directions. Architects dismissed the reports as stress, fatigue, or faulty memory. But then came the Rotterdam footage. In 1999, an office security camera captured a man walking up a staircase, only to return from the opposite direction minutes later, confused and pale, insisting he'd reached a locked utility room that didn't exist on any floor plan. Security personnel reviewed the tapes and realized the impossible. The man had climbed 10 steps, but his descent showed him coming from the top of a staircase with at least 12. He hadn't turned around. He hadn't crossed to another staircase. Something else had changed. But the incident that pushed the phenomenon into classified circles happened in 2008 inside a decommissioned research facility in Minsk. A structural engineer, Pavel Remez, was tasked with documenting wear and tear before demolition. He entered a main stairwell at 11:14 a.m. He didn't exit until 2:37 p.m. According to Remez, the stairwell extended. What should have been 3 flights became a twisting loop of concrete that folded onto itself. Doors that should have led to corridors opened into staircases that slanted at unnatural angles. He attempted to retrace his steps, only to find the bottom landing gone, replaced by yet another set of stairs leading upward. His recording device captured fragments of his breathing, footsteps, and frantic notes. "I keep climbing, but I'm not ascending," the stairs are repeating. "I think I'm inside the building, but not in the building." When rescue teams found him, he was on the exact same landing he'd entered, despite claiming he'd climbed hundreds of steps. Medical evaluation showed no dehydration, no disorientation, no hallucinations, but his watch was 3 hours slow. A leaked internal report from the Belarus Ministry of Infrastructure later described the phenomenon as a geometric displacement event triggered by unknown spatial tension. But the most chilling line appears at the bottom of the file, half redacted yet still legible enough to understand. The structure temporarily intersected with a non-Euclidean space. Staircase behaved as transitional geometry. Transitional, as if the staircase wasn't malfunctioning, but connecting to somewhere else. More recent sightings support that theory. A school in northern Italy was forced to close off its east stairwell when students reported emerging on the wrong floor, not an adjacent one, but a floor that didn't exist between levels. One student described the air as too thin, like the hallway was stretched. Another said the lights buzzed in a rhythm she couldn't place inside time. In 2022, urban explorers in an abandoned Moscow hospital uploaded footage showing a staircase that led directly into a concrete wall, and then moments later opened into a completely different corridor when they turned back to face it. The explorers laughed it off as shifting perception, but the hallway visible through the doorway had window frames inconsistent with the building's architecture, as if the opening belonged to a different building entirely. Physicists now suspect these staircases may sit on dimensional stress points, places where angles, distances, and orientation weaken just enough to slip. A staircase, after all, is a structure designed to transport you vertically. If dimensions buckle, even slightly, a staircase becomes the perfect bridge, a path that can be redirected without you realizing it, which raises the final question investigators never answer publicly. If staircases can shift while you're walking on them, where exactly have they taken the people who never came back? Elevators are simple machines. Press a button, move up or down, arrive at a destination that exists in the building's blueprint. Elevators don't improvise. They don't take you somewhere that no architect designed, and they certainly don't open into a hallway that isn't part of this world. But inside a mid-rise office building in Seoul, South Korea, one elevator did exactly that, and the incident forced three government agencies, none of which normally cooperate, to seal the building for infrastructure repairs that never happened. The first report surfaced in 2003 when an accountant named Ji-hoon stayed late to finish tax filings. He stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and felt the usual jolt of descent. Except it didn't descend. The elevator remained perfectly still, humming softly, as though suspended in thick air. Moments later, the doors slid open, but instead of the brightly lit lobby, Ji-hoon saw a dim corridor stretching forward, narrow, pale gray, with no signage, no pipes, no fire exit indicators. Just a single hallway, smooth and symmetrical, lit by an ambient glow that had no visible source. The air felt heavier, denser, like walking into a sealed vacuum chamber. He stepped forward. 5 steps in, he noticed something unsettling. His footsteps had no echo. Sound didn't travel. It was absorbed, swallowed, as if the space around him wasn't made of concrete, but something softer. Ji-hoon panicked and backed into the elevator. The doors closed instantly. When they reopened, he was in the real lobby. Security dismissed him as exhausted, and he tried to do the same, until 2 weeks later, when another employee reported the same hallway. By 2005, the building had 6 recorded incidents. Different floors, different times, same hallway, same impossible silence. An internal investigation began, led by a structural engineer named Min Soo. He discovered that the elevator shaft showed no irregularities, no hidden floors, no maintenance gaps, no architectural errors. Yet when he reviewed the lift's mechanical logs, he found something disturbing. During each reported incident, the elevator descent time registered as 0, not instantaneous, literally 0, as if the elevator didn't move at all. In 2008, a security officer named Hana equipped herself with a body camera and intentionally triggered the event by repeatedly riding the elevator alone at 3 a.m. the time all previous anomalies had occurred. On the eighth attempt, the elevator stopped at floor 4. The doors opened. The corridor appeared. Her footage is now classified, but a still image leaked from the recording shows the hallway bathed in a faint bluish haze, with a perspective that seems slightly off. Parallel lines aren't fully parallel. The corridor narrows and widens subtly, creating a visual tension that makes the viewer uneasy. In the footage, Hana takes a cautious step forward, and the floor beneath her ripples, not visibly, but the shadow cast by her flashlight wavers, as though falling over uneven geometry, like her foot touched a surface bending inward. At the 17-second mark, she whispers, "This place, it's not connected." Her voice sounds strange, muted, like the hallway is absorbing parts of her words. Then she notices something else, a faint vibration, not from the floor, but from the air, like she's standing inside a system that's running, humming, waiting. When she turns back toward the elevator, the doors are still open, but the interior is darker than it should be, as if the elevator is further away than the distance she just walked. The clip ends abruptly when the camera signal collapses into static. When responders found Hana minutes later, she was inside the elevator, unconscious. Her watch had stopped at the exact moment the footage ended, but her body temperature suggested she had been unconscious for over an hour. After this, the building was quietly shut down. All employees were relocated. The elevator shaft was filled with concrete, floor by floor. An extreme measure, and one that only made sense if the hallway wasn't part of the building at all. A leaked engineering memo from 2016 hints at the real reason. Spatial discontinuity detected. Elevator behaves as vector portal during low magnetic interference cycles. Another file adds a more chilling note. Hallway appears only when internal alignment matches external field. Unknown external source. Unknown external source, meaning the hallway wasn't being created, it was being connected. To what? To where? No one officially answers, but volunteers who have studied the still frame note something in the depth of the corridor. An outline, faint and indistinct, like a doorway far down the hall. A doorway with light behind it, not electric lighting. Something more organic, alive. If that's true, then someone, or something, might be waiting on the other side. And it's trying very patiently to line up with our world again. Hotels are designed for impermanence. New guests, new messes, new stories repeating every night. But there is a room in a 3-star roadside hotel in Romania that refuses to change. No matter what happens inside it, furniture moved, objects broken, sheets torn. The room resets itself the moment no one is watching. Not metaphorically, not it feels different, literally resets, down to the position of dust particles. It began in 2011 when a couple staying in room 209 complained that the room looked staged, as if it were a showroom, not a place where people actually sleep. The manager dismissed the comment until the cleaning staff reported something stranger. Every time they opened the door, the room was exactly as it had been the day before. Beds perfectly made, cups perfectly aligned, curtains perfectly straightened. Even after guests had trashed it the night before, upon re-entering, it was flawless. The staff assumed another cleaner was working early shifts, but the logs didn't match. No one had entered the room. The first proof came from a maid named Yulia. She intentionally left a towel half-folded and a chair angled away from the desk. When she returned 20 minutes later, Both were back in their original positions. She tried again, this time placing a pen under the bed, something no cleaner would ever check. When she returned, the pen was back on the nightstand, exactly parallel to the edge, exactly where it had been the day before. Management installed a camera facing the door to catch the mystery cleaner. For 2 weeks, the footage showed nothing. No one entered. No one exited. Yet every morning, room 209 sat pristine. In 2013, a frustrated night clerk named Soren placed a heavy dresser in front of the window. It took him nearly 10 minutes to push it into position. At 3:17 a.m., a guest in another room called to report a muffled thud, followed by silence. When Soren checked the surveillance feed again, the dresser was back against the wall, the correct wall, and the curtains hung perfectly symmetrical. When he entered the room, he found the carpet beneath the dresser unmarked, no drag lines, no compression, as if nothing had ever touched it. By this point, the hotel staff avoided the room entirely. Bookings were blocked. The door was kept locked. But in 2015, an inspector from the Tourism Bureau arrived unexpectedly and insisted on evaluating every room. They gave him room 209. He spent the night. At 2:41 a.m., he called the front desk, whispering frantically that he heard soft clicking sounds like objects shifting into place. He claimed the coat hanger on the wall turned by itself, that the sheets tightened around him, that when he stood up, the bed reset, smoothing itself out like time-lapse footage. He demanded to be moved to another room. The next morning, he refused to file a written report, but he did request the hotel remove room 209 from its registry. After his visit, the hotel's owner authorized a full investigation. Maintenance workers removed the door, shut off the electricity, and emptied the room entirely. Furniture, curtains, bedding, even the carpet. They left an empty box of drywall. When they returned the next morning, the room had restored itself. Furniture returned, bed dressed, paintings rehung. Even the smell of lemon cleaner lingered in the air. An electrician's log from that day contains a line that was quickly redacted. Room interior composition does not match documented inventory. Wood grain patterns identical to previous states. No variation detected. In 2018, a physics professor from Bucharest visited the site after hearing rumors through academic circles. He brought instruments designed to measure changes in electromagnetic fields. Readings were inconsistent, oscillating between normal and anomalously low. But his most shocking discovery was this. Every object inside the room had microscopic scratches and wear patterns that matched photos taken years earlier. Nothing aged, nothing decayed. Everything remained in a fixed, repeating state. He proposed a theory, never published, but circulating in leaked emails. Room 209 is stuck in a temporal feedback loop, a miniature pocket of time that resets to a baseline state whenever it is unobserved. Like reality is trying to correct itself. Like the room belongs to a different timeline than the hotel surrounding it. The hotel closed permanently in 2021. Some say the building was demolished, but satellite images show the building still standing. Though room 209's windows are always dark, always perfectly clean, and never open. People in the town avoid the hotel now. They say if you stand outside at night and wait long enough, you'll see lights flicker on in room 209. Not someone turning them on, just the room, remembering what it was supposed to be. Because room 209 doesn't simply reset, it reverts, like a dimension trying to snap back into its proper shape. And if that's true, it raises a question no one wants to answer. If a room can reset itself, what happens when it decides you don't belong in its baseline? Highway exits don't vanish. They may close, deteriorate, be swallowed by new construction, but they don't simply stop existing in the span of one night. Yet that's exactly what happened on a remote stretch of Interstate 84 in Idaho, where exit 1 and 12, once a common detour locals used for decades, suddenly disappeared. No warning, no crews, no signs. It was just gone. Worse, maps still showed it. GPS systems still routed drivers toward it, but the physical world refused to cooperate. The first report came in 2014 when a truck driver named Blake Ellison called Highway Patrol claiming the exit moved. Blake had taken exit 1 and 12 every week for 12 years to reach a small rest stop diner. But on that night, he drove past mile marker 111, 111.5, 112, and there was nothing. No ramp, no signage, not even the faint outline of an old exit. Thinking he'd missed it, Blake turned around at the next available exit, 118, and drove back. Still nothing. Just a long stretch of asphalt hugging a flat horizon. When police arrived, Blake insisted the exit had been there. Yesterday, they checked state DOT logs. There were no closures, no construction orders, nothing to suggest the exit ever changed. But something about the officer's tone in the dash cam audio is telling. Confusion, hesitation, because he too remembered using that exit years earlier. Over the next 2 months, 7 more drivers filed reports describing the same impossibility. An exit they had used countless times wasn't there. Each one was dismissed as a mapping error or misremembered route. Until November, when a state engineer named Laura Kim demanded an on-site evaluation. Laura visited the stretch of highway at dawn with 2 colleagues. Their GPS devices all display the same instruction: take exit 112. Yet the road remained bare, unbroken, as if the exit had never existed. But what truly unsettled Laura wasn't the missing asphalt, it was the topography. The land next to the road rose and dipped in ways inconsistent with official land surveys, like the soil had rearranged itself. Even stranger, the tree line nearby formed a perfect semicircle, as though shaped around a structure no longer there. Laura began to suspect a mapping error until her assistant found something chilling. Buried 6 inches beneath the dirt, next to where the ramp should have been, he uncovered a rusted guardrail post, the kind only used on highway exits. Old, bent, shredded by weather. A physical remnant of something the highway department insisted never existed. The discovery triggered a quiet internal review. Emails recovered from a later breach revealed a series of frantic messages between state engineers. Exit 112 archived 1998. Who authorized this? Highway plans show ramp. Current plans do not. Why are both sets of blueprints stamped as final? 2 overlapping revisions. Impossible. 2 blueprints. Both official, both final. One with the exit, one without. As if 2 versions of reality had merged, and someone forgot to reconcile the differences. In 2016, a highway patrolman named Daniel Morse encountered the anomaly firsthand. After responding to a stranded motorist, he attempted to direct her toward the nearest exit, 112. But when he looked up, the exit sign was there, standing tall, reflective. Green. 112, Pine Canyon Road. He blinked, and the sign was gone. Not faded, not turned. Gone. His dash cam footage shows a brief distortion, a shimmering effect, like heat rising off asphalt, except it was 2:14 a.m. in the middle of winter. The incident rattled Morse enough that he filed a private report to his supervisor, claiming the exit was phasing. His supervisor's reply was brief: "Do not document further. DOT will handle." But DOT never handled anything. Instead, a perimeter of discrete markers, the type used for seismic research, appeared along the roadside, unlabeled, unannounced. A leaked technical memo from 2019 identified the region as a spatial inconsistency zone. Two lines were unredacted. Topological mismatch suggests prior roadway existed. Current terrain does not support historical construction. Current terrain, meaning the land itself didn't match the past, meaning the exit didn't just disappear. The world around it rewrote itself. In 2021, a pair of hikers exploring the area captured final evidence: a concrete fragment half buried with the unmistakable curvature of a highway off-ramp. The concrete composition matched samples used in the 1980s. Yet official records insist no ramp was built at that time. Experts now debate whether Exit 112 was deleted from our reality or pulled from an alternate one that briefly overlapped with ours. If that's true, then it suggests something terrifyingly logical. Highways aren't permanent. Cities aren't permanent. The world we navigate every day may be more fragile, more flexible than we ever imagined. Because if an exit can vanish, then every piece of infrastructure, every town, every landmark we rely on could be next. And we might never know whether we misremembered it or whether it slipped back into the dimension where it originally belonged. Lakes are supposed to reflect what's in front of them: mountains, trees, sky, your own face staring back. But there is a lake deep in the Canadian Rockies where the reflection doesn't match the world around it. Not because of wind, not because of lighting, but because the lake seems to reflect a different place entirely. Locals call it Mirror Lake, though it goes by several names in older indigenous maps, most of which translate to variations of the water that shows what isn't here. It first came to scientific attention in 1992 when a hiker submitted a photo to a nature magazine. The image showed the lake's surface perfectly still, reflecting a skyline of jagged, unfamiliar mountains. The problem? Those mountains didn't exist anywhere in Canada, or North America, or any known geological record. The magazine assumed it was photo manipulation and rejected it, until a second hiker submitted an almost identical picture a year later, and a third, and then a fourth, taken from a completely different angle, each showing the same impossible landscape: tall obsidian-colored peaks, crescent-shaped rock formations, and a violet haze lingering above them, like mist from another atmosphere. In 1997, a graduate geology team investigated the lake. They camped along its shore for 3 nights, taking photos every hour to document lighting conditions. On the second night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., every student witnessed the reflection shift. The pine forest behind them dissolved from the lake's surface, replaced by a vast barren plain under a pale blue sky. One student, later interviewed anonymously, described it like watching a window open to another world. But the strangest detail wasn't the reflection, it was the temperature. While the air above the lake remained cold, the surface of the water warmed, rising nearly 4 degrees Celsius in under a minute. A change so abrupt it caused a thin mist to form. When the mist cleared, the reflection reverted to normal. Reports continued throughout the 2000s. Kayakers claimed their reflections lagged behind their movements by a second. Anglers said their fishing lines disappeared into mirror images of water instead of the real lake. One man swore he saw a moon in the reflection, a large, cratered sphere, even though the sky above was overcast. In 2011, a pair of wildlife photographers captured a video clip that was later seized by Canadian authorities. The footage, leaked in 2016, shows something extraordinary. A flock of birds flies overhead, but in the reflection, the birds look different. Longer wings, sharper angles, not matching any known species. And the reflective flock moves with a delay, as if emerging from somewhere slightly out of sync with the real one. Government interest escalated after a ranger named Thomas Leclerc encountered the lake during a patrol in 2014. At dawn, he saw the reflection showing a bright, alien sunrise, even though thick clouds blocked the real horizon. When he leaned closer, he noticed something else. The reflected shoreline didn't match the real one. It curved differently. It had structures, tall pillars or stone columns, jutting out along the edge, structures that did not exist in this world. Thomas backed away, but before he could react, a ripple passed across the lake's surface, not on the real water, but within the reflection itself, as if something on the other side had moved. His incident report, heavily redacted, contains one chilling sentence. The reflection was not mimicking reality. It was operating independently. After this, Mirror Lake was quietly restricted. Trails were erased from park maps. Rangers were instructed to redirect hikers. The official explanation? Unstable terrain. A lie so transparent it almost invites curiosity. In 2019, a classified physics team performed discrete measurements around the lake. Their equipment registered repeated electromagnetic spikes, pulses lasting 3 to 5 seconds, perfectly synchronized with the moments when the reflection changed. Their conclusion, leaked through an anonymous email chain, suggests Mirror Lake may sit at a dimensional weak point where visual information slips across parallel realities. Not a portal you can walk through, not yet, but a portal you can see through, a window into a version of Earth where geology, biology, and even the sky evolved differently. The final leaked file is the one government agencies refuse to acknowledge. It contains a single image captured at 3:11 a.m., a humanoid silhouette standing on the other side of the reflective shoreline. Tall, thin, motionless, staring directly into the lake, which in the image reflects our world back at it. If the file is authentic, it means we aren't the only ones looking through the window. And the other side has noticed us too. Cities change constantly. New shops, new streets, new buildings replacing old ones. But even in the most chaotic urban landscape, alleys don't spontaneously generate overnight. They don't appear in places where no alley could possibly fit, and they don't disappear again the moment someone turns away. Yet in a crowded district of Manchester, England, there is an alleyway that locals speak of only in passing, like a rumor they don't want to validate. The alley that shouldn't exist. The first documented account dates back to 2009. A delivery driver named Trevor Finch swore he found a narrow passage between two brick buildings on Market Street, a gap so thin he barely noticed it at first. He stepped in to smoke a cigarette, thinking it led to a small courtyard. But the deeper he walked, the stranger it became. The alley felt longer than it should, colder. The ground sloped downward at an angle that didn't match the surrounding architecture. and the brick walls, once warm red, gradually shifted into a darker, older stone, rough, uneven, almost damp. Then Trevor noticed something unsettling. The noise of the city faded. No cars, no voices, no wind, just a low hum, like distant machinery behind a wall. When he turned around to leave, the entrance was different, not gone, just farther away, much farther. He backed up quickly, heart pounding, until he finally emerged onto Market Street again. Shaken, he tried to show the alley to another worker later that day, but the gap between the buildings had vanished. Solid brick stood where the entrance had been hours earlier. Trevor's friends laughed it off until 2011, when a university student named Dana filed an almost identical report online. She described an alley near the same block, though she had never heard Trevor's story. She claimed the walls didn't line up right, bending inward like they were converging toward a point behind her. She also wrote that the shadows inside the alley didn't match the sun's angle. They leaned sideways, as if cast by a light source in a different world. Her post was buried within days, but a line from her account resurfaced in an archived screenshot. It felt like the alley was adjusting to me, like it didn't expect me to be there. In 2015, two urban explorers set out to investigate the rumor. They wandered the area for hours with cameras but found nothing, until dusk, when one of them spotted a narrow slit between two pubs that hadn't been there earlier. The footage, later leaked anonymously, shows them approaching the gap cautiously. Inside, the walls appear disproportionately tall, at least twice as high as the exterior buildings would allow. Their flashlights revealed small carvings on the bricks, symbols that didn't look modern, spirals, intersecting lines, and something resembling a sun with too many rays. 10 meters in, the explorers encountered a turn. Impossible, given the building layout. One insisted they leave. The other wanted to push forward. The footage ends when their camera flickers violently. Static, distortion, then black. They emerge seconds later outside the alley. But here's the impossible part. Their timestamps showed they had been inside for 1 minute, while their phone clocks indicated they had been missing for nearly 40 minutes. Neither explorer could explain the missing time. By 2018, the Manchester City Council quietly altered zoning maps for the area. The documents list a structural anomaly zone, where construction permits are prohibited. When asked by local journalists, officials denied the zone existed, even as the document sat publicly accessible for a brief period before being taken down. But the most chilling evidence came in 2021, when a shop owner named Henry reported a late-night encounter. He was closing his store when he noticed a sliver of darkness between the two buildings across from him, a space that wasn't there when he opened that morning. Curious, he shined his flashlight inside. The beam stretched unnaturally far, too far. Instead of illuminating a few meters of brick, the light reached what appeared to be an open courtyard. A courtyard that shouldn't exist in the tightly packed district. He described faint silhouettes moving at the far end, tall, thin shapes that didn't walk so much as glide. When one of them turned, Henry snapped back instinctively. There were no faces, just smooth, featureless heads. He blinked, heart hammering, and the alley was gone. The gap sealed. Brick returned, but his flashlight, still on, lay on the sidewalk. Battery drained completely, as if something had pulled the power out of it. A leaked physics memo from 2023 labeled the site as a dimensional pressure point. Its definition, a temporary corridor formed when two spatial layers overlap imperfectly. If that's true, then the alley isn't part of Manchester. It's an access point, a thin seam between our world and another, a place not meant for human passage, a place that forms only when the layers of reality misalign. The last line of the memo, half redacted, is the reason the case is still classified. Corridor appears adaptive, not passive, suggests external agency. External agency, something on the other side, something building the corridor. Not for us to enter, but perhaps for it to observe or cross. The alley that shouldn't exist may be rare. It may be hidden, but it proves one thing with chilling clarity. Our world has seams, and sometimes those seams pull apart just wide enough for something else to peer through. People imagine dimensions as distant, unreachable realms separated from us by cosmic walls. But after 10 leaked files, those walls look thinner than we were ever told. A building that rearranges itself, a patch of desert where time bends backward, a forest that slips out of existence, elevators that open to nowhere, a lake that reflects a world we've never walked, an alleyway waiting in the dark for someone to notice it. These aren't stories scattered randomly across the globe. They form a pattern, a map of weak points where our reality creaks under the weight of whatever presses against it from the other side. And if these leaks are growing more frequent, then the barrier between dimensions isn't just fragile, it's failing. Some of these places are still accessible. Some have been sealed, paved over, or erased from public record. But all of them raise the same question. If pieces of other dimensions are slipping into ours, how long before something bigger crosses through? This has been Archive 9, where the files they buried finally surface.